All right. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Co-presenting with me today is Nick Ryland, financial advisor and co-founder of Vantage Point Financial. Nick has been in the industry for over 20 years, currently holds a CFP, CHFC, and CEP accreditations. Throughout his career, he's been on every side of the financial services industry, gaining a unique perspective on the importance of tax planning early on. He's one of the first advisors that I've come across in the industry who's actually executed comprehensive planning the right way for his clients. Nick is an Iowa grad, an incredible leader, husband and father. He and his beautiful family reside here locally in Naperville.
Thanks, Luke. Excited to be here today with all of you and co-present with my partner, Luke Mroz. Luke is an outstanding financial planner with over 15 years experience in the industry. We were lucky to find him about 15 months ago, bring him onto our team. He's added tremendous value for our clients, our team, and our community. Has just tremendous experience advising high net worth families on everything from their investment portfolios to expert tax planning, legacy planning, income planning, everything in between. So he's done a phenomenal job. Really excited that he's a part of the Vantage Point family. Speaking of families, he has three young boys and a beautiful wife. They live in Elk Grove Village, and he graduated from DePaul University in Chicago. And really excited to present with you today, Luke.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for that introduction. So we'll begin here. Our focus today is Roth conversions. The theme that I want everyone to keep in mind from the very beginning is paying taxes on your own terms versus the IRS's. Most people that understand that taxes matter, but they often think about them in 1 year or a silo. And a Roth conversion forces us to think bigger. It asks over the course of your retirement, your spouse's lifetime, and eventually your heirs' inheritance. When is the best time to pay taxes?
Yep.
So this presentation is not about finding a magic loophole. It's not about avoiding taxes altogether. Roth conversions do not eliminate taxes on any pre-tax money. Instead, they allow you to choose when to recognize some of those taxes. So the reason this topic is so important now is that many retirees have accumulated substantial balances in any pre-tax accounts, such as traditional IRAs, 401ks, and 403bs. While those balances look great on statements, every dollar has a tax obligation attached to it. At some point, that money will be taxed, whether you spend it, whether it's forced out through RMDs or passed on to your beneficiaries. So today we're going to walk through not only the problem, but the opportunities, the mechanics, the planning process. The goal today is for you not to leave and say, the goal for you here is to basically understand that I shouldn't convert everything today. That's usually never the right answer. The goal today is to leave you with a better framework. Should I convert? How much should I convert? When should I convert? And how does that decision fit in the rest of my retirement plan? So as we go through this presentation, think about your own accounts. Where is most of your money? Is it taxable every year? Taxable later? Is it potentially tax-free? That's the lens that we'll use throughout this presentation.
So there's a Q&A button that you can ask questions. We do have a question here. Someone is mentioning that audio is echoing. If anyone else is having that issue, please let me know in the Q&A section. I'm not hearing it on my end from Luke, but if others are, let us know and we can see if we can fix that on our end.
So, all right, so let's begin here. We'll begin with a little problem here. So Americans have done a fantastic job saving for retirement. Whether it's 401ks, 403bs, 457s, traditional IRAs, or any other pre-tax investment accounts, we've accumulated trillions of dollars in tax-deferred retirement accounts. The challenge is that many people think of these accounts as their money. In reality, they've been growing in a partnership with the IRS. Every dollar that has never been taxed represents a future tax liability. Today, Americans hold about 30 trillion in retirement assets, with the majority of those in pre-tax retirement accounts. That means the government is waiting to collect on their part or their portion. Many retirees, that is a hidden tax problem. The more successful your investments are, the larger your IRA becomes. The larger your IRA becomes, the larger the requirement distributions eventually become. Success in investing can have unintentional future tax problems. So you should be asking yourself, how do I grow? Not only how do I grow my retirement account, but how much of that account will actually be mine after taxes? Retirement planning isn't about building wealth. It's about keeping as much of it as you can in your pocket. So to further exacerbate that previous slide here, we see the projection of pre-tax balances and potential taxes that they might have. Here in 2040, we see a balance of $56 trillion as an estimated amount in pre-tax investment vehicles. With a tax rate of 25%, that tax amount could be 14 trillion. That's money that could have been saved for you and or your family. That's money that's never been taxed. When we contribute into some of these pre-tax accounts, we do receive a tax benefit in the yearly contribution. Your employer might also contribute pre-tax dollars as well. That money grows tax deferred for years or decades. Tax deferral can be powerful, but also creates a future obligation. The tax is not forgiven by the IRS. They are simply lying in wait.
And I think we're using 25% here as an estimate. We believe that taxes have to go higher in the future. Our national debt is approaching $40 trillion, and we're paying over $3 billion a day in interest on that debt. So this year we'll eclipse over $1 trillion of interest on the debt. So it's just a math problem that we believe that taxes have to go up. This 25% number is probably conservative as far as an effective tax rate for average Americans. So really today is extremely powerful for you to put yourselves in the driver's seat during your retirement to pay less in taxes. And we'll really dive into the details of how to do that. So we like to look at taxes in kind of this tax triangle. Every dollar is taxed in one of three ways. Bottom left, tax me always. These types of accounts or investments are taxed every year, like your savings accounts, your brokerage accounts that have interest or dividends, CDs. The interest on those is taxable every year. This could be money that you're not using, but it's taxable regardless. So if you have an investment account, a brokerage account that's just in your individual name, maybe joint name with a spouse or in the name of your trust, a lot of people will say, hey, I have dividends, but I'm reinvesting those back into those stocks or those mutual funds. So those shouldn't be taxable. They are. They are absolutely taxable, regardless of whether you use that money or you reinvest the dividends or you let the dividends just pile up in cash in that account. It's still taxable every single year. It'll show up on your 1099 and you will be assessed tax on that. Now, over to the right, tax me later would be your tax deferred accounts. This is where the majority of Americans build their biggest retirement assets. IRAs, 401ks, 403b accounts, pensions, when those come out, those are taxable and you've never paid tax on them yet. All of these things sound great on the surface. You're putting money in, you're not getting taxed on those dollars now, but then the IRS comes knocking when you're in retirement and every dollar you pull out is taxable. Now, the good news is that Illinois, for those of you that live in Illinois, Illinois does not tax retirement income. So they don't tax your pensions, they don't tax IRA withdrawals, 401k withdrawals. Really nice. They don't tax Social Security either. That's really nice. I mean, Illinois, as we all know, gets us every other which way between real estate taxes, sales taxes, tolls, you name it. And then on the top is the tax-free section, the tax me never again. So the Roth IRA or Roth 401k falls in here. Cash value life insurance, certain types of life insurance policies can build cash value and you can take those out tax-free if you follow the rules of those withdrawals in that policy. And then health savings account. This one's actually kind of unique in this bucket, whereas Roth and cash value life insurance, you're paying tax on the initial money you put in there. But then if you do it right, you're never paying tax again. Health savings account, HSAs, that goes in pre-tax, grows tax-free, and as long as those are qualified distributions, you do not pay tax on that either. So it's tax-free on both ends. very few things out there that's possible. A thing we like to talk to our clients about, if you have an HSA, you could also use it for a retirement income vehicle. It does not just have to be for healthcare related expenses per se. So here's how you can do it is contribute into your HSA. You can invest that money. And then whenever you pay out of pocket for copays at the doctor or prescriptions, whatever it might be, don't use your HSA dollars, pay out of pocket, and then instead save those receipts and save those every year, year in and year out. And then down the line, could be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you might want to take a $10,000 distribution out for a vacation, find $10,000 of receipts. You can offset the distribution with those receipts, and it's completely tax-free. A lot of people aren't aware of that kind of tax-free income vehicle to be used that way. But a little homework assignment for all of you would be smart to go through all of your investments and total up how much you have in each of these three sections. How much is in that tax me always, tax me later, tax me never again. The goal is to obviously get more on the top of the triangle here into tax me never again. All right, so taxes rise throughout retirement, typically for most people. And I'll say that taxes are a lot more complicated in retirement for the average American, which seems unfair. It's supposed to be your golden years, supposed to kick back and enjoy life. But taxes get pretty complicated because you have a lot of different types of income and they're taxed in different ways and they can affect each other in different ways. So looking at this little timeline here, retirement, let's say you retire between age of 60 and 65. 65 seems to be a very common number. And I don't know the rhyme or reason behind it. I think it was tied to Social Security back when it was started in the 1930s. Full retirement age was 65 at that time. So that just kind of stuck. But most people retire younger than 65. And a lot of those people, it's not on their terms. They lose a job or there's a health related reason or a family reason that they have to retire early. But typically you have retirement and those first couple of years of retirement before a lot of this forced income comes into play can be some of your lowest tax years and the best years to do tax planning. So then Social Security kicks in for most people somewhere between 65 and 70. You can choose as early as 62, but that's forced income now that will be taxed in a certain way. Obviously, it's good because you need that income and you paid into the system all these years, but it is bringing a taxable source into the picture. All along the way, you also have, like we showed on that previous screen, you have your interest on savings and CDs, any dividends, all that stuff comes in every year on the accounts that are outside of your retirement accounts. And then, depending on your age, your required minimum distributions begin, where the IRS says, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, we need you to take money out of your IRA, whether you need it or not. It was 70 and a half a few years ago. It's been bumped up to either 73 or 75, depending on your year of birth. But you're forced to take money out whether you need it or not. And for a lot of people, if they've ignored their IRAs and haven't been proactively distributing from them or tax planning around them, they get a surprise where they have to take out a lot more money than they need to live on. That's a huge tax inefficiency, and it's driving people into higher tax brackets. And then later on, you have this widow tax trap, where typically both spouses don't die at the same time. At the death of the first spouse, you lose one Social Security, you lose some or all of a pension. So typically your income's going down, but taxes typically go up because you're now filing single instead of married filing jointly. And all the tax brackets get cut in half. And that's a big surprise for a lot of widows. And then estate transfer. So when you pass money on, you have potentially estate taxes. You have both, could be Illinois, you could have federal taxes, but then also the way these assets are inherited, like retirement accounts and IRAs, your beneficiaries have to pay tax on those dollars, and they might pay them at much higher rates than we're seeing today. Now, the retirement tax stack, we call it, lots of different types of income, and they just stack on top of each other and can impact your bottom line in a massive way. So if we start at the top, we have Social Security that's taxed a certain way. Up to 85% of it may be taxable depending on your total tax picture. If you have a pension, it's fully taxable as ordinary income. You might have rental income where your net income is taxable. Interest on your savings, CDs, bonds, those are taxable as ordinary income. Dividends, if they're qualified dividends, which means a U.S. corporation, you have advantageous tax rates of either 0, 15, or 20, depending on your overall tax bracket. RMDs we mentioned, those are taxed as ordinary income as well. Capital gains, if they're short term, meaning less than a year, they're taxed at your ordinary income brackets, which could be as high as 37%. If they're long term, held for more than a year, you get favorable treatment there of 0, 15, or 20%. And then any other IRA withdrawals you need to take out are fully taxed as ordinary income. So all of these added together determine your entire tax picture. Our goal for our clients is to proactively plan out their income for retirement to make it as tax efficient as possible. Our goal is to limit their lifetime tax bill throughout retirement. And you can do that in a lot of very proactive ways.
This slide here is where we connect the concept of the actual tax brackets. We talked about the retirement tax stack and how that income continues to stack on. Well, a Roth conversion also creates ordinary income tax. That means the amount we convert is layered on top of that other income for that year. That planning opportunity is to choose how much of the income we intentionally want to create while staying within the target bracket. So we call the strategy fill the bracket. We're not simply converting a random amount. We begin with your expected income, as Nick mentioned, Social Security, pension, any dividends, interest. We subtract any deductions and we calculate how much room remains before that next bracket. That available room becomes our prime candidate for conversion. For some clients, the goal might be to fill up that 22% tax bracket. For others, maybe higher net worth individuals who expect higher taxes in the future, maybe it makes sense converting into the 24 or even 32. So instead of siloing our decisions based on where we fall in the tax brackets this year, we should ask ourselves whether we believe we'll be paying more taxes in the future. So recognizing these brackets creates planning lanes. Roth conversions work best when we intentionally use those lanes rather than letting future RMDs determine the timing for us.
Sorry, Luke, technical difficulty here. There we go.
There we go. Cost of waiting is one of the easiest Roth conversion concepts for clients to understand. Traditional IRA can continue compounding for years, and that's great. But if the entire account's pre-tax, that tax liability also compounds, right? The larger the account becomes, the larger the future RMDs become, and the more taxes that you pay. So this is especially important for clients who don't need their IRA for spending. If you decide to live on cash, brokerage assets, or pension income, and not use your IRA is quietly compounding in the background. While this is great for wealth building, it's bad for future taxes. So in this example, our visual here, we have an individual age 62, $2 million IRA, 5%. At a 5% growth, you could reach close to 4 million by age 75, which is 13 years away. That's great on growth, but again, a much larger tax obligation. And once those RMDs begin, those forced distributions are added on top of any other income, as Nick had mentioned, Social Security, pension, rental, dividends, interest, potentially pushing you in a higher tax bracket. You could be thinking that you were in the 22, now you're in the 24, maybe the 32. The big question that arises is, should we use some of today's lower tax bracket capacity to remove tomorrow's forced taxable income? All right, so we've had a major change in laws with the Secure Act 1.0, Secure Act 2.0. Most importantly, it's changed how inherited IRAs are taxed. It also pushed the RMD age from 70 and a half to 72, then 72 to 73, and now to 75, based on your date of birth. So before the law changed, the stretch IRA was a great concept that allowed beneficiaries to stretch the IRA, stretch the distributions, taking those over your lifetime. That meant smaller annual distributions, decades of continued tax-deferred growth, and overall lower tax burden. Right. So for non-spouse beneficiaries, this option is gone. So now when you inherit a retirement account, those distributions need to happen within 10 years. It often means larger withdrawals within those 10 years in a shorter period of time, depending on where you are in terms of wages, whether you're working when you receive that IRA, that means higher taxable income. because of forced withdrawals in your peak earning years. So why does this matter? If your goal is to leave more for your family and not the IRS, it's important to plan ahead. So the Secure Act to end didn't eliminate planning opportunities, it just made proactive tax planning important to us. So Nick had mentioned the widow tax trap. We wanted to add a visual on this. So it's one of the most important emotional planning, death and taxes, kind of morbid thought there, but when couples plan, they plan around a joint tax return. They look at their incomes, their deductions, tax brackets as married filing jointly household. At some point, one spouse will outlive the other. That's where the tax picture changes. Spouse passes away, that surviving spouse or widow goes in a single tax filing. The income might not fall in half. The higher Social Security is taken. The pension might be 100%, it might be partial. Sometimes the expenses don't change, right? RMDs will continue. Investment income may remain the same. Some of those expenses continue to remain significant. So that's where the surviving spouse is now pushed in a higher tax bracket because those tax brackets have been cut in half. There's a smaller tax deduction. Medicare IRMA thresholds are also lower for those single filers, and we'll get into that later here.
All right, so getting to the headline here, what is a Roth conversion? How does this work? So I want to first take a step back and differentiate between the difference between a Roth contribution and a Roth conversion. A Roth contribution is when you're working, you have earned income, and you're putting new contributions into a Roth IRA or Roth 401k. There are rules around each of those, but the idea is this is new money that's been taxed by your employer, and then you're putting money into these Roth accounts. And then they grow tax-free. And as long as you follow the rules of being over age 59 and a half and having had an account open for at least 5 years, all distributions are completely tax-free. Now, a conversion is where we take existing pre-tax dollars that are in pre-tax retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, all of those retirement accounts we've never been taxed on, and we're choosing to move some or all of that money over to a Roth IRA. So we're taking it from all these different types, as you see on the screen. It could be a SEP IRA, it could be a 457, there's a 401a, there's a bunch of versions of really the same thing of pre-tax retirement accounts. You pay taxes today on the amount that you convert, or when I say convert, you move from the pre-tax account over to your Roth IRA. So you got to be careful. You want to make sure that you're paying attention to all of your other taxable income for the year, because this will get stacked on top and could push you into higher tax brackets. So doing a very thorough analysis of where you're at for the tax year before doing a Roth conversion is the smart thing to do. So we do for all of our clients, and we really dive into the dollars so that we're not jumping into higher tax brackets or into IRMA thresholds that we're not aware of or we don't want to be in. And then it gets into the Roth IRA, and now you have tax-free growth and tax-free withdrawals the rest of your life, as long as you follow the rules, like I said, of being over 59 and a half and having the account open for at least 5 years. Now, this slide may seem really simple, but the power of tax-free growth, if we look at a traditional IRA or traditional 401k where it's pre-tax, and let's say you have a $2 million balance. Well, you don't have a $2 million account. I mean, yes, you do, but you don't own $2 million. You have a joint account with the IRS, is what we like to say. Now, we want to make the IRS the smallest partner as possible in those dollars, but technically you do not own all $2 million of those. Now, versus the Roth IRA, if you have a $2 million Roth IRA, that is all yours. You pay tax on the money as it went in, all of the growth, everything in there now is completely tax-free. Every dollar is yours to spend or to leave to heirs, 100% tax-free. So it might be straightforward. And yes, you have to pay some tax also in the Roth IRA. But as you go through retirement, the difference between these two types of accounts is the difference between you being in the driver's seat or the IRS being in the driver's seat. If you get the Roth, there are no required minimum distributions on that. And income, obviously, from that is tax-free. So it could keep your other income sources taxed at lower rates, as opposed to just building up these high pre-tax balances and the IRS comes knocking and you have to take minimum distributions and it could drive all of your taxes higher. So why consider Roth conversions? Well, Five major benefits: tax-free growth, like we said, tax-free withdrawals, no required minimum distributions, lower lifetime taxes. So it's not just about, hey, how much am I paying on this conversion now? Can I keep it in an average tax rate of 20%? But then in the future, when I'm getting my income from this tax-free bucket, what is the impact on all my other dollars? Is that keeping all those other dollars in lower tax brackets? So it's almost like a compounding effect on your future tax bill in your favor. And it's greater flexibility for heirs. So Luke walked through the Secure Act rules, that 10-year rule. Now, Roths, if you inherit Roths, for the spouse, there's no 10-year rule on anything, whether it's an IRA or a Roth. But as a non-spouse beneficiary, so it could be your kids, grandkids, other loved ones, they still have a 10-year rule on the Roth, but it's not taxable. So they just have to deplete it all by the end of the 10th year. And all of those distributions are still completely tax-free. Some people say, well, why does the IRS care? Why do they want that money out of there in 10 years? Well, they want you to take that money out and either spend it in the economy or reinvest it in other taxable accounts where they can get tax dollars on the future growth. So prior to that Secure Act change, people could pass down Roth IRAs for generations, and that compounded tax-free growth is money that the IRS was never going to get their hands on again, and they want a piece of that pie.
Yep. All right. Does it make sense, Bert? Well, it depends, right? Everyone's personal and financial situation is unique to themselves. This slide's important because it shows balance. Roth conversions can be powerful, but they're not right for everyone. Let's start with the left side where Roth conversions make sense. Nick had mentioned who the ideal candidates are and when that ideal period is. Recently retired clients are often the strongest candidates. They're in a lower taxable income after wages stop, but it's before Medicare, it's before Social Security, it's before RMDs. That window there creates a large room in our tax brackets. So if we look at when Roth conversions may not make sense, well, what if the individuals need that IRA money immediately? They're going to start those withdrawals. What if the balance is lower? What if they anticipate low taxes in the future, right? What if there's poor health and the money is needed? And then there's Medicaid planning as large. And if you're anticipating an IRA and leaving it for charitable estate, then it might not make sense to do a Roth conversion. All right, so Vantage Point has a Roth conversion planning process, and how we look at each individual situation is unique. We've broken it down into a common process here. So most individuals, when they're looking at Roth conversions, they ask too broad of a question. Should I convert? Or how much should I convert? Well, we should look at that, right? What's the planning process? How do we get there? How do we back into an answer? And it begins with understanding your current taxes. We need to know your current income, deductions, filing statuses, capital gains, pension, Social Security, business income, any other unusual events. We create that as a baseline. Step two is projecting future taxes. The reason we do this is, does your pension start next year or 2 years? Does your Social Security start next year? Might we want to do more this year versus next year? Or is there a certain expense coming out next year where we would like to do more this year and skip next year? And then we take a look at our tax brackets. When we're looking at tax brackets, that's also unique to every individual. Does that mean filling up your 22%? Does that mean filling up your 24? Again, higher income individuals, maybe that makes sense going up to the 32. Step four, you calculate the annual conversion amount up to or close to that tax bracket that you like to stay in. We want to monitor IRMA premiums here, which I'll go over in detail in a little bit. And then we rinse and repeat. We review the process annually. Do we want to continue doing what we had anticipated in the past? Is there room for more? Has anything changed? It's not a one-time decision. It's Roth planning. It's an annual strategy that we review every year. We're going to highlight this real quickly, but paying the tax is also a strategy that you can use. Typically, when you're thinking about Roth conversion, you're thinking about paying the taxes out of the IRA directly. While it does lower the balance of your IRA and lower the balance of future RMDs, it also allows you, it also doesn't allow you to put more into your Roth conversion. So the best options here are obviously using cash outside of retirement accounts. Allows you to put more into a Roth, allow for more growth over a period of time. And the other option is brokerage assets. Maybe we can sell something at a loss that you can use for your taxes or get you net neutral and use that money into a more tax efficient account. That way you're not being taxed on a yearly basis. You're never being taxed on that balance. Let's go to IRMA. So IRMA is, the way I look at this, is another set of like tax brackets. There's an extra Medicare premium charged to higher income individuals on top of their normal Medicare. So Medicare comes with the cost. If you decide to spend more money in a certain year, or we look at converting more money, that will bump you up to a tier. IRMA increases the cost of Medicare Part B based on your modified adjusted gross income from 2 years prior. So if we're looking at 2026, we look at your modified adjusted gross income in 2024. IRMA is temporary. It makes sense to weigh the options, whether paying a little bit more in IRMA in 1 year benefits you more than a higher RMD in the future. It's not simply to avoid it, but to maximize your lifetime wealth. We evaluate these Roth conversions alongside these Medicare IRMA increases, tax brackets, Social Security, and future RMDs, and to determine whether it makes sense to cross those brackets or stay below them.
Yeah, one thing to think about there is some people look at IRMA and they'll come to us and they'll say, come hell or high water, I don't want to pay more than the standard premium. And so keep me below that threshold. Now, if they have massive pre-tax retirement accounts and we project out that they're going to be having to take out huge RMDs, it could make some sense to come, jump into a tier 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on your situation, to pay IRMA for a couple of years. It doesn't stick with you forever. So when your income comes back down after you're done doing the Roth conversions, you will go back to that standard premium. And so sometimes in a vacuum, if your IRMA cost is doubled, of your premium, people don't like that because it's a 100% increase. But if we paid an extra couple $1,000s a year for 1 year to get maybe $200,000 more in a Roth IRA growing tax-free forever, honestly, it's like a rounding error in the big picture. So another way to look at it is you're going to pay the tax at some point. When you do these proactively, you get to be the judge of how much you're going to pay when, rather than roll the dice. When your RMD age, taxes could be a lot higher, values could be higher, and then you don't have any choice.
Yep. All right. Why are Roth conversions so powerful? You only pay the tax once, right? When we do a Roth conversion, there's a federal tax, sometimes state tax. In this example, we weigh the basic trade-off, right? The economic trade-off. So suppose we convert 100,000 and the tax cost is 20% of 20,000. We voluntarily pay the tax now in order to move 100,000 into a Roth IRA. So we paid it outside of the IRA. So the emotional challenge right now is the tax bill is immediate. Why am I getting taxed today versus in the future? So most clients see this 20,000, they might think, why would I choose to pay that? But the strategic question is, what future tax bill am I trying to avoid? If 100,000 stays in a traditional IRA, it's going to grow, and that future withdrawal will still be taxable. And if rates are higher, if the account grows significantly, that future tax is going to be much larger. So the phrase, you only pay once, is useful, but we need to explain it carefully. Let's go to the next slide. So watch it grow. Using the rule of 72, So at 77.2%, your money doubles every 10 years. You take the rule of 72 divided by the number of years, it gives you the interest rate that you need to double your money. So using this as an example, we converted 100,000 and we paid 20% of 20,000 on that amount. Well, it doubles in 10 years because we've earned that 7.2%. And now we're at 200,000 as a Roth IRA balance. Well, now that tax amount that we've paid is cut in half. It's at 10% based on our new account balance. And if that continues to grow in another 10 years, we convert that 200,000 into 400,000. And that tax amount that's paid thus is less. It's also cut in half. So now we've paid 5% in taxes on 400,000 on an amount that's completely tax free. This is kind of why we think about Roth conversions as a long-term horizon. The longer you have to invest those Roth IRA accounts, the larger benefit for you. So when you're evaluating Roth conversion, you ask how long will the money stay invested? Who might use it? And is today's tax rate attractive compared to the future tax rate? So here's what that means for your heirs when you say you only pay tax once. So let's say we left the 400,000 in the traditional IRA. So 100,000 doubled in the traditional IRA to 200 and then 400,000. And at the time of passing, that 400,000 was transferred over to our heirs. Well, based on where our heirs are with their federal taxes, in this example, it could be 24%. Our heirs are paying 96,000 in combined taxes on that amount. That's about a quarter of what they had anticipated to receive. They see that balance. That balance is not entirely theirs. It's a joint account with the IRS. But if we converted early, it's 20,000 taxes, total taxes forever. And the heirs inherit the full 400,000. So this is a simplified example. The actual results depend on tax rates, investment returns, timing, state taxes, but the concept of it is extremely important. A Roth conversion not only improves a retiree's flexibility, but also improves the after-tax inheritance of the next generation. So let's go to the next slide, Nick.
Yeah, so let's jump into a more specific case study here, a little more detail. John and Jane Doe, a real life tax planning story. So we kind of modeled out a Roth conversion scenario for them. Both age 62, IRA balances right at $2 million. Let's assume a very conservative rate of return of 5% throughout their entire retirement. And we're going to convert 1.5 million, that's our target, over the next 10 years. They also each have $40,000 of Social Security. Irma comes in at age 65 when they can take Medicare. And beginning in year 5, we increase their taxes by 30%, meaning whatever bracket they're in is going to jump by 30%. So if it's, the 10% bracket is now 13, so on and so forth. Now, that might feel like a big jump. We don't know where tax rates are going. We assume they're going higher. We don't know how long this current tax plan will be in place. The one big beautiful bill a year ago made this tax law permanent, but all you need is a vote of Congress and a president to change that. 5 years from now, we'll have a different president. They could raise taxes. Also, before that one big beautiful bill last year, the tax plan was set to expire, and there was going to be about a 20 to 30% increase in almost every tax bracket. So this is pretty in line with what we almost saw last year. And then we'll assume the beneficiaries, when they inherit this money after John and Jane pass away, they'll pay an average tax rate of 30%. Again, could be very conservative. If tax rates go quite a bit higher, like we potentially think they can. So there's two things here, kind of two paths. What if they kept the IRA at $2 million compared to converting to the Roth? So keep it in the IRA, tax-deferred growth. Taxes are paid later when distributions are taken, including RMDs. Potentially larger IRA balance subject to the RMDs, so that could be a big negative for them. Tax rates are uncertain, like I just mentioned, and the heirs would inherit a taxable IRA, which, like we said, at 30%. Or they could convert to Roth. You pay taxes intentionally. You get to choose. Like, you're not forced to do this. And we might lay out a 10-year plan for clients, but year by year, it's a different decision. It's called an incremental Roth conversion strategy. So we may not do it every year. Maybe there's a reason in year three we're not going to do the conversion. Maybe there's more income than we expected from something else. We can pause it for a year and then jump back on the next year. But you're going to potentially reduce your RMD exposure. You're going to shift assets to tax-free buckets. And of course, your heirs are going to inherit that tax-free. So let's look at the math. So mistake number one, if they waited and did not convert, growing $2 million at 5% up to age 75. So for 13 years, that $2 million would turn into 3.8 million. Pretty nice, huge balance. That's great. But that's what we call the tax ticking time bomb, because now they owe tax on all 3.8 million. So let's look at this. What if they took the RMD only? So they never did a conversion, and starting at age 75 until they passed away, they just took the required minimum distributions out of their IRAs. They didn't need any other money. That's all they took every single year. Based on those tax assumptions and that 5% growth rate, they would pay almost $2.1 million in taxes and IRMA fees throughout their lifetime. Now let's compare that to what if they just did level income? They started, and said, okay, we're just going to take out an even amount throughout retirement, which would be more than your RMD typically. This is a little more tax efficient, but they'd still pay over 1.1 million in total taxes in IRMA fees. Now, if they do that 10 years and convert 1.5 million of the 2 million to a Roth, they will actually pay a total of 359,000 in lifetime taxes and IRMA fees. So, question is, would you rather pay 359,000 or somewhere between 1 and 2 million? I think it's pretty clear what everyone would choose. So we built a plan for them. Like we know the advantages of the Roth compared to just taking the RMD. So step one, convert the 1.5 million over a 10-year period. You want to manage those annual tax brackets. So we're spreading that out, doing that incremental plan. Now tax rates could change in 5 years and change our plan. Like those of you that are current clients, you saw this leading up to the expiration of the previous tax bill at the end of 2025. We were accelerating some of our Roth conversions for a few years in case taxes did go higher. Good news is the market's been doing great. That money's been growing, and we didn't pay obscene tax rates on any of those dollars. We want to watch the Medicare and IRMA. We want to keep an eye on that. If we can avoid those and still accomplish our Roth conversion goals, that's great. Like I said earlier, it could make sense to dip into these different thresholds and pay some IRMA tax. But also then we're planning for the heirs. We want to compare the after-tax wealth versus beneficiary tax rates. And this is a kind of more advanced thought on planning for heirs. You want to think about, most people don't want to just leave a whole bunch of really taxable assets to their kids. Now, some people say, you know what, I'll be gone. I don't care. It's their problem. They're still going to have some money even after they pay the tax. That's your attitude. That's fine. A lot of our clients say, you know what, if we can keep more of that in our family, whether it's through us while we're retired or our kids and grandkids, more money in our family is better. Now, we all know the government will spend our money. There's no doubt about that. They'll spend that dollar times, 3 or 4, and might not be the way you want that money spent. All right, so comparing this, so what we did is, because we modeled these out, so maybe on the surface we said 10 years seems to make sense, but let's look at the actual numbers based on all those assumptions we used. And if you look at the bottom here, what we are looking at over 10 years, that $359,000 tax and IRMA expense, and then total wealth would be 7.49 million. So what we're looking at here is if we kept the Roth growing, so we do the conversions, pay the taxes, and then we keep that growing throughout retirement. If you never touched it again, it'd be about 7.5 million. So pretty powerful, but the software and the projections tell us, well, 5 years is actually the way we could save the most on taxes and generate the largest amount of wealth. You'd pay 340,000 in total taxes, and you'd have a little bit more wealth, a couple $100,000 more. Now, that could make sense. Some people might say, you know what, that's, getting money in the Roth sooner. I love that. But other people might want to spread that out a little bit longer. And for an extra $19,000 of tax to spread that out over another 5 years might make you feel better. So what we talk about a lot in financial planning is there's the mathematical stuff we can do that makes sense. And then there's what's comfortable and what feels good to you. And a real financial plan is something that probably meets in the middle for each person.
So the impact of that tax planning or the result is pretty substantial. So going back to the same example where we have the same IRA and different tax strategies and obviously different after-tax outcomes, right? So we started out with the same IRA. What changes is how John and Jane choose to manage the taxes of their retirement. So in the first row there on the left, if we keep the IRA and decide to take out RMDs only, we pay 2.1 million in taxes, and our age 100 pre-tax wealth is 3.64 million. Again, pre-tax. So if we keep the IRA and decide to spend that down with the level income, maybe we need the income or we decide to take it out and not put pressure or apply pressure on other assets, well, we pay 1.13 million, about half of what the account is currently worth in taxes. And the average or the age 100 pre-tax wealth that we'll leave is 2.15 million. Again, pre-tax wealth. Now, if we went through with the plan and converted those assets over a 10-year period into a Roth, we stay with 360,000 in taxes, but that age 100 Roth wealth, so no tax on it, is close to 7.5 million, right? This distinction is important. First two columns, again, pre-tax wealth, money that still carries a future tax liability. And the Roth column represents assets that can be accessed income tax free. So the takeaway isn't that the Roth always produces this result. These are hypothetical, but the ability to put money in Roth assets sooner and allowing those to compound and grow are a lot more beneficial than some of these strategies that we see here in front of us. All right. So as we wind down here towards the end of our presentation, I wanted to add a couple myths and questions here. I'll be in a lower tax bracket. Nick had talked about this with the ballooning debt, close to $40 trillion, the amount that we're paying on interest. I don't know. Who knows, right? And if taxes do go up and you decide not to do anything on your IRA, or your RMDs might push you, right? We have to remember that it's RMDs, Social Security, pensions, other incomes, a widow tax trap that might affect us in the future. We need to stop thinking in silo. I don't want to pay taxes. No one does, but with pre-tax retirement accounts, tax is already embedded. Choice is forced on us when we start taking RMDs. It's better to be strategic now. So I'll wait until my RMDs. That might be too late. We talked about the compounding growth. Our Roth conversions on top of RMDs can push income in even higher. So if you decide to do Roth conversions when RMDs are present, you have to take your RMD. And then if you decide to do a Roth conversion, you're pushing your income into a higher window. It's better to start before RMDs begin. So I'll convert everything as a fourth here. It's usually in the night, not the best answer. We'll model out for you what that looks like, whether it makes sense to pay the taxes now. But converting too much at a time creates unnecessary tax, maybe higher Medicare premiums, and possibly liquidity issues. The goal is to convert strategically. My accountant already handles this. We love this one. So accountants are pretty critical, but they're focused on tax preparation. What happened last year, right? They're not really forward looking when it comes to retirement planning. Ideally, an advisor and tax professional should talk. So questions to ask yourself. So again, will taxes be higher? Maybe, possibly, probably. Either way, it's probably a great idea to put some of those assets into that always tax-free bucket, right? So if one spouse outlives the other, the household may lose one Social Security benefit and move into narrower single tax brackets, which makes taxes and Medicare premiums more challenging. All right, next we have to consider RMDs. If the large pre-tax IRAs continue to grow, future required distributions may create more taxable income than we actually need. Do I want tax-free income later? Well, we want to ask how the conversion tax will be paid. If it's outside cash, more of that money will be converted, and any money that we convert is available to us in the future. Having the option or the ability to just source or take income from a non-taxable asset provides flexibility and liquidity. And then leaving money to heirs. If we can pay for the taxes now, instead of giving our heirs a burden, if we can do some, not all of it, it only improves the situation for our heirs while also improving the situation for us in the future in case we need to move it. It's a great legacy item. We talk about it when we talk about our legacy, leaving assets to children. How would those assets like to be transferred, or how would you like those assets to be transferred? Best would be probably a tax-free asset. All right, so some key takeaways as we close out our presentation. Let's bring them together. So taxes are often lowest before RMD begins. Doesn't mean that everyone will be in the low tax window, but many are. Remember, converting before those forced distributions is imperative. Maybe waiting for Social Security or converting prior to Social Security can also allow you to convert more. Roth conversions are about lifetime taxes, not just this year's taxes. We talked about silo thinking. Don't look at your tax bill now. Think about how that tax might be spread out and how that after-tax balance or tax-free balance will continue to grow. What is your lifetime tax on that amount? Every situation is unique. We talked about this. The right conversion amount depends on income, deductions, filing status, cash availability, age, health, investment returns, Social Security timing, pension, state taxes, state goals. There's a lot that goes into it. And planning beats reacting, right? We do encounter a number of individuals that do reach RMD age and they get into an oh no moment. I should have been doing this like others had instructed me. So again, planning or at least knowing where you fall in tax brackets is a great way to start. Can I convert a little bit? Can I convert a lot? Where am I in the current tax bracket? Last one, the best strategy is personalized and annual. That goes with our planning process. Each situation is unique. Let's take a look at where you are in your current tax brackets. Let's also anticipate or forecast future tax brackets and determine a number that we can convert.
So it all comes back to your bigger picture financial plan. And we have our elevated retirement plan that we take all of our clients through and build their plan and then monitor and modify it throughout their lives. And when we think about these 6 key areas, the goal here is to give our clients clarity and confidence, as they move throughout retirement. The clarity to know that they're going to be okay no matter what's going on in the world, the economy, the stock market, and then the confidence to go out and truly live the life that they've dreamed of, the retirement they've saved so hard for and sacrificed for. We believe they've earned the right to a great retirement. And it starts with this elevated retirement plan. And now when we think about these 6 key areas, let's just take Roth conversions as an example. Everything is intertwined and connected. So, in a silo, some people think, well, Roth conversions are a tax management decision. So on the bottom of our circle here, they think about it like, yep, it's a tax decision. Well, no, not really. We're considering first at the top your goals and concerns. The goal is to avoid RMD taxes later. Maybe the goal is to pass on more tax-free dollars to your heirs. Whatever your goals are, that's going to drive that tax decision. And then also we think about income planning. Well, we have to think about your income this year if we're going to do a conversion. What sources do you have? What is your tax picture? And then also thinking about, well, when we're planning for income 10 years down the road when taxes might be higher, wouldn't it be nice to have some of those dollars tax-free? And then the investment decision around a Roth conversion. What assets do we convert? And then what do we invest in when we convert them into a Roth IRA? Now, we typically recommend clients, you do a conversion, you put your Roth IRA and those converted dollars in your later bucket, the money you don't need for 10 years or more, because we just paid the tax on those dollars. Now the benefit is future growth. We want all that growth to be tax-free. So these are typically our more growth-oriented investments. Some people get really aggressive with it. Some people are more moderate growth. That's specific to you, but there's absolutely an investment decision around that Roth conversion. Also, a really key thing where we're not big market timers of timing the market, but we are when it comes to market timing Roth conversions. The best time to do a Roth conversion is when the market's low. So think of maybe you have a volatile asset and it's beat up 20 or 30%. Well, convert that out of your IRA over to your Roth, pay the tax on it now, and then let the rebound in that asset happen in the Roth. It's a really proactive way to do it. Now, I'm not hoping we have a downturn in the market so we can do these, but when we do, because we will, when we do, it's a great opportunity. And then when you're thinking about IRMA, that's under the healthcare and insurance. What are the impacts of my Medicare costs when I do a Roth conversion? And then obviously we talked a lot about legacy. You know, are we going to pass on pre-tax dollars? Or are we passing on tax-free dollars like a Roth? So this one decision to do a Roth conversion is completely intertwined with every part of your plan. So it's really important to consider it. Doesn't mean it's right for everyone, but absolutely dive into it. If we're your advisors, we're already doing this for you. If you have more questions for us, let us know. If you're not a current client and you want to learn more about this, our team is going to follow up, and you can schedule a strategy session to meet with one of our advisors to discuss your personal situation, whether it's Roth conversions or anything else. We're happy to spend some time with you and dive into the details about you and your plan and your goals going forward. So I want to thank you all for your time today. I don't see any questions in the Q&A section. If you have any buzzer beater questions here, feel free to throw them in. If not, we'll close it up here in about a minute.
Thank you, everyone. Through a lot of, yeah.
We did.